Hey, 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 happy Thursday, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Horrifically Charming, where we embrace the dark, live the horror, and dissect it all. I'm your host, Joe Thomas, and on this week's episode, we're going to be talking about horror movies from 1896 through 1939. So let's dive in. Before actually I get started, I wanted to give a shout out. I keep forgetting to do this, but I want to give a shout out to the podcast Scaredy Cast. So it's Scaredy Cast, C-A-S-T, and especially Tony. When I was looking at starting this podcast, I got very frustrated with the whole process. It's so many questions and Googling and things just weren't working, you guys. And I was on the verge of being ready to give up. And on a whim, I reached out to Scaredy Cast via Facebook, and Tony immediately responded, and he has helped me so much with this podcast in giving me guidance and support. He was the first person to tell me, just start recording. Do not try to make your episodes perfect because then you'll never record. So if it wasn't for Tony, I probably still wouldn't be recording these episodes. So thank you to Tony and the whole crew over there at Scaredy Cast. Make sure you go over, give them a listen, give them a follow on Spotify and all the other platforms because they are an absolutely wonderful podcast. Okay, so back to the topic at hand with my news people notes. I feel like a news reporter today. I gotta tell you guys, today was not the day. I did not want to record today. I've just got a lot going on. I've been very frustrated and I was not in the mood to do this episode. But I powered through, and in doing my research, I found my passion again and realized that this is my happy place. I love horror so much. It brings me so much joy and comfort, and it's so calming to me. And I know that sounds weird, but I had a lot of trauma in my early childhood, and before I probably should have been watching horror movies. Horror movies was where I went to cover the noise. We'll just leave it at that. And so screaming and chainsaws and razor blades scraping on things, it's a very comforting sound to me. So again, didn't want to do this today, but once I got into it, I realized that this is my happy place. So today, again, we're going to be talking about horror movies from 1896 through 1939. So right before 1940. Couple things. So one of the things in researching this that I've discovered is there are definitely two themes that all horror movies have in common. And that is the destruction or preservation of the physical body and the damnation or the salvation of the soul. So all horror movies seem to revolve. Oh boy, here we go, guys. Revolve around those things. So as most of you know, if you've listened to some of the previous recordings and stuff, horror gets its roots in Gothic literature. So going back to even before Poe and everything, Gothic literature always took place in medieval times with these castles and these dark forests and foreign lands. And one of the reasons that America, when we first started doing horror movies, a lot of the ones that we did were just that. We didn't take American folklore and turn it into horror. We took like British folklore or foreign country folklore and turned it into our movies because it gave us that safe distance. It gave us that this happened in the land far, far away, not on American soil. So there was that little bit of safety there. Okay, so jumping right in, this is going to be a long podcast, guys, because there's a lot of movies to cover. Now, again, I am not going to delve into every single one of these movies. We'd be here for hours because, as you know, you can do a whole podcast on one movie. But I do want to cover, and again, these are going to be American movies, okay? With the exception of the first movie that I mentioned, all of these movies are going to be American horror movies. I will do another episode on German and French and all the other countries. But to include all of those in this would have been impossible to do in one episode. So we're going to go with American horror movies, with the exception of this first one here. And the first one we're going to talk about is The House of the Devil. Now, this is a French film, and it's Le Manior de Diable. Is du Diable? I don't know. It's French. It translates to the House of the Devil. So this was a film that came out in 1896. It is considered the very first horror movie, but it is also considered the very first vampire movie, because in this little skit, there's a bat that flies in and poof, turns into the devil. So a bat transforming into a human form, or the devil, they took that as representing a vampire. So it is also considered the first vampire movie. I did not know that. Then we're going to go to the first American horror movie was 1898's The Cavalier's Dream. So there's a lot of different meanings for Cavalier, guys. In this instance, Cavalier is a nobleman. So in this movie, I think it's 46 seconds long. It's not a movie, but it is a movie for back then. So 46 seconds long, the Cavalier falls asleep at a bar table. We see this robed witch come in. She raps on the table. She disappears and this feast appears on the table, and say it with me, chaos ensues for, 40 seconds. So that's the first American horror movie. And then we're going to go over here. Let's see. So you go to 1900. Okay. Faust and Margurite. So Faust and Margurite, this was 56 seconds, I want to say 57 seconds. So Faust and Mephistopheles, I always say that wrong. You see them, you go in, and Mephistopheles is standing here, Faust is standing here, Margurite is in a chair. So Mephistopheles tells Faust, you must slit her throat. Faust says, no, I can't do that. So Mephistopheles slits her throat. Poof, Margurite disappears. Poof, Faust is in the chair. End of movie. It's actually one that you can watch, though. And you can find that. So I definitely, if you want to get into some of these older horror movies, that is one go watch these short ones, guys. They're fun. And then, so this is kind of, we go to 1908, where we find the first of many adaptations of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Now, when I say many, I'm not talking about the ones that loosely base a story off of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I'm talking about movies that literally are called Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So this first one was 16 minutes long. Some say that this is the first American horror movie because of its length, because you go from seconds, under a minute to boom, 16 minutes long. So they say that this is the first American horror movie. There are no known copies of this film, though. So unfortunately, I was not able to watch it because I couldn't find any copies of it to watch. So that kind of sucked. Another one I found, which is funny because when I was doing my research on American horror movies, this movie did not come up. It came up in this random page that I wasn't even looking at for this. I was doing other research on it, but it's called 1909's The Sealed Room. So this is based loosely off of a Poe story, but it's about a king who builds this room that only one way in, one way out for his concubine. However, the concubine is not loyal to him and is, screwing around with the local troubadour, and chaos ensues. So that one, though, was kind of weird because, like I said, it doesn't come up in anything. I actually put a little sticky on my things here because it was just weird that I found it, but I did look it up and I watched it and I was like, okay, this actually would fall under horror. So I don't know why it's not listed, but it's not. Thank you, Spirit Halloween, for this wonderful Exorcist mug. No, they did not give it to me. I bought it, but I love it and it makes me happy. Okay, then we go to 1910. This is when the first Frankenstein came out, you guys. So this one was 15 minutes long. I don't want to say it's not memorable, but compared to future ones, this cast is not what we base our representation of Frankenstein's monster off of. You go to 1912, and guess what? Now we have another Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This one's 12 minutes long. This is the only time, this Jekyll and Hyde, where two actors played the different roles. Normally, the same actor would play Jekyll and Hyde. This is the only adaptation where two different actors played those roles. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then you randomly go to The Spider's Web, which, again, cannot find a copy of this, so I wasn't able to watch it. But you go from these American horror films that are seconds long and then minutes long to boom, this is an hour and 30 minutes. However, you can't watch it because there are no known copies of it. So that was kind of disappointing because I really was excited to watch that. Then we go to 1913, and hey, guess what, guys? We have another adaptation of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Now, this one is 26 minutes long. Nothing too memorable about it. It's not horrible, but it's not the one that we base everything off of, like that first Frankenstein. You also in 1913 had The Skull and The Werewolf. Not favorite movies. Again, these are movies that I will watch for the knowledge, but not movies I would choose to watch again. The ones that I would choose to watch again are the ones that I'll go into a little more detail on. 1914, The Avenging Conscience. Nope. 1915, I'm sorry, that was 1914. 1915, you have The Haunting Fear and Life Without a Soul. I can't lie, I have not watched either one of these. I plan on watching them if I can find them, but until I started doing this list, I had never even heard of those two. So in 1916, you have The Crimson Stain Mystery. So this is where Dr. Montrose creates this formula that he intends it to turn people into geniuses. But unfortunately, what it does is turn them into murdering thieves. And, say it with me, chaos ensues. So that is actually an enjoyable movie. I do recommend if you get a chance to watch it, give it a watch. And then we go from 1917 to 1920. Germany dominates. There are no American horror films that come out in 17, 18, or 19, or 20. I take that back. I think we do have, 20 is when we come back into the picture. So 17, 18, and 19, no American, it's all German. And I think there's some French films in there. So then we jump to 1920, where we don't have just one, we have two adaptations of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So the first one is 79 minutes long and was put out by Paramount. So very well known. And it was kind of unfortunate because I think it was Sheldon Lewis put out the second one. It was only 40 minutes long. And it was released a month after the Paramount one was. So it was, of course, horribly overshadowed by this mass production put out by Paramount. But yeah, literally within a month of each other in 2020 or 2020, in 1920, we had two Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hydes come out. And then we also had The Penalty come out in 1920. So I'm going to kind of stop and go on a little off sub discussion here, because I want to make sure that everyone who is a horror fan knows who Lon Chaney is. Okay. So Lon Chaney played in The Penalty. Lon Chaney is often referred to as the first American horror actor. Or star. Like, he was known for horror. Now, don't get me wrong. His very first role was in 1913's Poor Jake's Demise. And then he did 18 more movies before. So to explain, Jake's Demise, 18 more movies. All of those movies are considered lost film. You cannot find them. So 19 of his films, you guys, were lost. Now, however, in 2006, someone found 8 minutes worth of Poor Jake's Demise. So we get 8 minutes of his very first film, and then his next 18 films, we have nothing, which is really unfortunate. So, of course, he was a major star in the 1920s. He starred in dozens of films and was referred to as the man of 1,000 faces because of his ability to obscure his features with makeup. And it was this ability, this skill he had with makeup and his ability of pantomime that made him known for his two most iconic roles, which is Quasimodo in The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I know it's not really a horror, but some people can say it is. But also the absolute slam dunk of 1925, which we're getting there. I know I'm jumping ahead, but 1925 is The Phantom of the Opera. If you do not know what I'm talking about with Lon Chaney, and The Phantom of the Opera and that iconic role, can you call yourself a horror fan? Really? I mean, yes, you can. I know people say that's gatekeeping, but if you haven't seen it, even if you're not a fan of the older movies, please go watch it. At least watch the scene where Christine rips the mask off his face. It's just iconic. It is iconic, and it is one of those movies. I can watch The Phantom of the Opera over and over and over and over and over again. It's just amazing. So those are his two very much most iconic roles. And then, like I said, he was referred to as the first horror star. I mean, he was in, I'm going to kind of cheat and jump ahead and then we'll go back. 1922, he was in The Blind Bargain. 23, he was The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and he was in While Paris Sleeps. 1925, The Monster, and then he was also in The Phantom of the Opera in 1925. In 1927, he did London After Midnight and The Unknown. And I think that was his last horror movie, was actually The Unknown. I can't remember what his absolute last movie was. But again, the funny thing is, he didn't just do horror. He did everything. But he did horror so well with his makeup skills that is what he became known for. So if you don't know who Lon Chaney is, please go Google him, look him up, watch some of his movies. I'm going to show his picture here. And I'm sure you've seen, I flashed up here his iconic roles, the makeup and stuff, because I'm not going to lie, big crush on him. Big crush on him. Okay, so that was 1920, guys, where we go through the penalty and the two Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hydes. Then we're going to jump into 1922. So 1922, you had A Blind Bargain, The Ghost Breaker, The Headless Horseman, awesome movie, and One Exciting Night. So of all of those, I mean, A Blind Bargain, I like, of course, because Lon Chaney's in it, and The Headless Horseman is amazing. Then we go to 1923, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, again, Lon Chaney. The Last Moment, I haven't watched that, but I have it on my watch list. And then While Paris Sleeps. While Paris Sleeps, great movie. Please check that out. That one has Lon Chaney in it as well. Then we go to 1925. So 1925, you have The Monster, has Lon Chaney in it. The Phantom of the Opera, Wolf Blood, and A Tale of the Forest. So I had a little trouble finding anything on Wolf Blood. I haven't seen it. So if anyone knows anything about that, message me or leave something in the comments if you know where I can find a way to watch that. We go to 1926. 1926 was kind of a slow year. We had The Bat, The Bells, and The Magician. The Bat, The Bells, and The Magician. Sounds like a book to me. That alone sounds like one movie, but it was 3 different movies. The Bat, The Bells, The Magician. 1927, The Cat and the Canary. So The Cat and the Canary is remade a couple times. And it's one that it's one of those ones I watch and I go, okay, is this horror? But it is listed in every horror genre. So if any of you have seen it, tell me whether or not you agree that falls into the horror genre, even considered back in the day. You've got The Gorilla, London After Midnight, Lon Chaney, and The Unknown, Lon Chaney, and then we have The Wizard. We go into 1928. So 1928 was a big year. Big year. You've got The Ape and The Fall of the House of Usher. So for those of you who have watched The Fall of the House of Usher on Netflix, this is the OG. Go watch it. All of this is based off of Poe, who I love. But this original, The Fall of the House of Usher, watch it, watch the new one, and tell me what you guys think of them. And then you have The Terror. So The Terror was the very first horror movie to have sound in it. Now think of this. This revolutionized horror, you guys. We could now hear the squeaking doors. We could hear the phantom footsteps, the ghosts wailing, the lightning, the howling, the screaming victims. We could hear all that now. It took our horror experience to a whole new level. And it changed the horror genre forever. So The Terror was the first horror movie, and that was in 1928. And then you have The Man Who Laughs and The Last Warning. Those were both put out and both had sound as well. So now every horror movie that comes out has sound. We go into 1929 and we've got The 13th Chair. So funny thing, this is another one that it didn't come up in a normal search. It actually came up by accident on another list and I had to look at it, and if you Google it, it says this is a horror movie. I don't know why that one and The Sealed Room are left off of those lists so often, but I liked it. And it has another gentleman we're going to talk about, Bela Lugosi. I know everybody knows who Bela Lugosi is. So The 13th Chair was the 1929. So then we go into the 1930s. So as as any true horror fan knows, the 30s were considered the golden age of horror in Hollywood. This is when Universal really kicked it into high gear, and we came in with those big, big, big monster movies. So we're going to talk about Bela Lugosi real quick. So Bela Lugosi, everybody knows him as Dracula. I am Dracula, standing up there when he's talking to Renfield. So his first American horror movie was The 13th Chair in 1929. And then in 1931, he did Dracula. So all future Draculas, I mean, there are a few that kind of go off, but most of the future Draculas are based off of Bela Lugosi's version of Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula actually had long white hair and a mustache. So Bela Lugosi and his accent and his gentlemanly nature and this almost royalty about him, when it's just, he's amazing. So he set the precedent for all future Draculas. So in 1931, we had Todd Browning's Dracula with Bela Lugosi. We also had George Melford's Dracula that came out that same year with Carlos Valanis, I want to say. I can't read my own writing, you guys. As the Dracula. I can't lie, it's not a real memorable performance. I mean, if you put him up against Bela Lugosi, there's no comparison. I'm sorry. And then you have Frankenstein that came out in 1931, of course. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde again. Now, I will tell you, this version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is considered like the classic version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It is also the only one that won Best Actor for Frederick March. He won Best Actor for this role. So that's kind of cool. I did not know that. I found that in my research. And then another movie we had in 1931 is The Phantom. Not one that I would probably watch again. Mm-hmm. Tell me you don't love this cup, you guys. So warped. Okay. So then we go to 1932. So 1932, whew. Okay. 1932, we had Dr. X, The Most Dangerous Game, and then we have Freaks. So for those of you that don't know, Freaks, Browning actually hired physically and mentally disabled people to portray these roles of the freaks in this carnival. So I wrote their names down here. So you've got Daisy and Violet Hilton that play the Siamese twins. You've got Johnny Eck, who has no lower body, walks on his hands. And you've got Prince Randian, who was born with no arms and no legs. And then there's a term for this, but when it's like a shrunken head syndrome, I can't remember what it's called, you guys, but there is a medical term for it. But so he hired these people because he had actually Browning had been raised around the carnivals. So he wanted to bring these people in to portray these freaks correctly. However, it kind of backfired on him. So whether people thought it was discriminatory to bring them or too repulsive for normal people, this movie was heavily censored and often banned in a lot of places because it was just considered too repulsive and grotesque to be watched, which I found absolutely fascinating when I found that out. The other movies that year, you've got The Mummy, not the Movie, The Mummy, Island of Lost Souls, that is a Bela movie. You've got Murders in the Rue Morgue, another Bela Lugosi movie. Congo, The Old Dark House, The Mask of Fu Manchu, which is funny because we always refer to that. At least we did, Gen Xers. The mask, you got your Fu Manchu mustache. Anyways, I digress. Then we've got White Zombie. So White Zombie, we all know Bela Lugosi, but also Rob Zombie's band is named after this movie. Kind of cool. Trivia if you didn't know it. And The Monster Walks. Sorry. Hold on. Let's see if I'm right on that because I wrote it really tiny and I'm old. Yeah, The Monster Walks. Didn't know I wore glasses, did you guys? So that brings us to 1933. 1933, So Night of Terror, Bela Lugosi, The Invisible Man, Murders in the Zoo. I'd never heard of that movie. Mystery of the Wax Museum, Supernatural, and The Vampire Bat. Of all of those, I've seen, of course, The Invisible Man. Oh, and The Monkey's Paw. Sorry. I've seen The Invisible Man, The Monkey's Paw, and Night of Terror. I have not seen The Vampire Bat, Supernatural, Mystery of the Wax Museum, and I never even heard of Murders in the Zoo. So I don't know what I can tell you about that. So in 1934, so mid 1934, there was a lot of pressure put on Hollywood by the Legion of Decency. And yes, that was a thing, you guys. So they were threatening to boycott and all this stuff. So that's when the PAC was created, or the PCA, I'm sorry, the Production Code Administration, which is when horror movies and other movies became very much censored. So this is when you talk about a pre-code movie, this is what they're talking about. This is a pre-code, or anything before mid 1934 is a pre-code movie, meaning it wasn't really censored. People didn't give a shit what you did. But in 1934, all of that changed. So Bela Lugosi, and I would be remiss to not mention Boris. I always say his last name wrong. It's Boris Karloff. Anyways, he and Karloff, there it is. So he and Bela Lugosi actually did 8 films together. They kind of became, so Universal had this habit of recycling actors and sets and stuff like that. It's not that it was a bad thing, but you'd see a lot of the same character in different movies. I will tell you that Bela Lugosi in, I want to say it was, what movie was it, you guys? The Son of Frankenstein. That's what it was. So in The Son of Frankenstein was the first time you really saw Bela Lugosi let go of that Dracula persona. And it was kind of cool. So anyways, again, I digress. So The Black Cat was the very first movie that Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff did together. And that came out in 1934. So that came out pre-PCA. So it wasn't really censored too much, but if it had come out after PCA, I think it would have been a completely different movie. You've got the Condemned to Live, Mad Love, Bride of Frankenstein came out, and I will tell you, I did not realize this, but Bride of Frankenstein was actually considered one of the first comedic horror movies. And I guess if you watch it, I can see that, because you do chuckle through it a lot of times, like him with his friend smoking cigars and stuff. It is, in her reactions to him, it is kind of comedic. You've got Mark of the Vampire, which was also a Bela Lugosi film, The Crime of Dr. Crespi, and Werewolf in London. So Werewolf in London is one that I want to mention, because this came out post code. So after the PCA came out. And if you look at other werewolf movies before then, they were very sexualized. There was a lot of sexual references. It was just a totally different movie. This Werewolf in London, if it hadn't been censored, again, what I think would have been a much different and better movie. But because this was right when the PCA came in, this movie was toned down so much that it almost makes it just not watch-worthy. So that's unfortunate with that one. Let's see. Where do we go next, you guys? Oh, we're getting close to the end already. Where are we at? 29. All right, we're right about time. Right about time. So then we go to 1936. You've got The Devil Doll, Revolt of the Zombies. Watch it. The Invisible Ray, Bela Lugosi again. The Walking Dead. Not The Walking Dead you're thinking about. Not even remotely based on it. And Dracula's Daughter. So Dracula's Daughter was the last film in the Universal OG monster series. Okay. And it's a great movie. So if you haven't seen Dracula's Daughter, go watch it. So then this genre disappeared for 2 years. 1936 or 37 and 1939. There's nothing, guys. Okay. So from 1937 to 1939, or right up, so 1937, 1938, nothing. Horror movies in the US, nothing. What happens that's kind of funny is in 1938, this random theater in LA decides it's going to show a triple booking of Dracula, Frankenstein, and our RKO's Son of Kong. And there are lines around the block, you guys. Like, sells out. They had to extend it several times. And this gets Universal. Universal's like, well, hey, we're going to put out Dracula and Frankenstein as a double feature then across the country. And guess what? It did amazing. So then we go into 1939, where now everybody's like, horror movies, yay. So you get Buried Alive. The Gorilla, which is Bela Lugosi. The Cat and the Canary again. The Man They Couldn't Hang. They could not hang, sorry. The Return of Dr. X. And Torture Ship. And then last but not least, we get The Son of Frankenstein. So The Son of Frankenstein was actually started without a completed script. They actually started filming before the script was even completed, you guys. And this is considered like one of the favorite fan movies of this era. I can't lie, I haven't watched Son of Frankenstein. So in doing this research and finding this, I was like, wait, what? I always thought it was just going to be like another one, you know, like Bride of Frankenstein, blah. But this is considered one of the favorite horror movies of this era. So I am going to have to go watch it and find out what all the hubbub is about. So that's where we are, guys. That gets us from 1986. That gets us from 1896 all the way through to 1939. And again, these are just American films. I'm going to list them all below as well. So if you want to go back and refer to them and try to put some on your watch list, please do. And again, if you haven't checked out Lon Chaney, Bela Lugosi, and Boris Karloff, please go check those guys out. They are the three most iconic horror actors of those early eras. And they continue into the 40s, which we'll cover in another episode later on. But I just want to say again, thank you to ScaredyCast. I got my little post-it here. ScaredyCast, if you haven't watched them, please go watch them, you guys. They have audio and video podcasts, and they are amazing. And it really sucks because they're in Jerome tonight as I'm recording this for tomorrow's release. And I really wanted to be there, but I can't. So guys at ScaredyCast, shout out to you guys. Thank you for always being so supportive and amazing. That's going to do it for us, guys. Thank you all for your support. Of course, as you know, this podcast is only made possible because you guys come in, listen to the episodes, like, watch, follow, and all that good stuff. I can't thank you enough for that. It has been a frustrating yet amazing journey, and I'm only 5 episodes in. So I have a ton more episodes that I've got written down that we are going to do together. This is not stopping. And I just wanted to thank you all again so much for coming in and supporting me every week. Next week's episode, I don't know what it's going to be yet. I'm going to surprise you guys on this one because I got so many ideas. I can't focus on one right now because, again, it's been a day, guys. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Have an awesome weekend, and may every day be filled with horror and sprinkled with charm. Thanks, guys. See you next week.